that part. It's the decision part, you know? But then I feel like with everything else too, you're already in a situation where everybody watches everything, knows everything. Rumor mill picks up on like even a hint of something. You know what I'm saying? It can go it can go from North Coast down to Southern region in like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
But I feel like already having that component on the professional side or with like your judging teams and all that kind of stuff, then you add it on top of it. I think when you get lazy with your discipline and then you let go of what used to be a more proactive identity, when you let go of that part and you just sink into the bullshit, it gets harder and harder to reclaim it. You know what I mean? Some people, like, the whole house has to like come crashing down. Some people have to hit a rock bottom. Some people have to get to, I don't know, some kind of like trigger point where like you're miserable enough that all of a sudden you'll do anything besides sit in that same spot any longer, you know?
Ego. It all comes
Yeah.
down to ego. Ego is the key word, I think, because it's just it's thinking that you have it figured out and knowing that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like knowing deep fucking down that you do not have it figured out, but your ego is keeping you complacent in the same place that you've always been.
Mm-hmm.
And or it's getting you complacent in a place that you shouldn't be
Yeah.
complacent. And now you're stuck here. And I'm wondering if that's part of the issue with the 3 to 5 year ag teacher or that 5 to 10 year ag teacher is the complacency aspect. Because there's got to be another spark that hits at some point. But
Yeah.
like that 3 to 5 year time, it's like, well, I know everything now. I'm a fucking professional, right? And there's a difference between being good at what you're doing, like we talked about the other day, and actually being like, okay, my classroom, my lesson plans are dialed in, like all of that stuff is really sound. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to put as much effort into it. So I can, spread some effort and grow in some different areas versus like, well, I'm not even gonna fucking deal with it. I'm just gonna show up and fucking teach just because, I'm so good. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, you're not that
Well,
good.
and two, there is a difference, and this is where like some of my coaching stuff comes in. There's a difference for me between like looking back to places in my career that I got to in ag teaching. There's a difference between figuring out how to be good at some stuff, right? Like eventually I got pretty good in the classroom. Like
Mhm.
I felt real good about my ability to engage with students and set the stage and do all the things, right? Like I felt really good about that. I had periods of time where I felt really good about CDE teams and some different things. There were other areas less so. Now being outside it, the one thing that even for me, being someone who I always geeked out at conferences, I always had a brand new notebook because I would be the person writing, scribbling as fast as I could if there was a keynote speaker. I don't care if I hated the person. And I don't mean like person hated. I mean like if I didn't resonate with their vibe or their energy, I was still so hungry for development that I was glued to every word in the hopes that something was going to trigger, like you said, ignite something for me to like push forward to whatever that next level was going to be. I was always wishing, wanting, hoping, craving for that. Whereas now with what things like you and I are doing, my focus is always first on self mastery, right? And my my coach mentor on a regular basis will call me out and call other people out on our team, um and from a growth perspective, of course, but she'll say, because someone made a comment the other week that something about what we were doing was too easy, and that's why she wanted to shift and like go focus on selling insurance or something else, right? Because she wanted a challenge. And then my coach Christy goes, it's easy. Okay. Does your bank account show that it's easy? Does this show that it's easy? If something's so easy for you, have you mastered it? Like, are you the master of whatever that thing is? Could you go and teach it to someone else and enable them to be able to duplicate that for themselves and for other people? Because if you can't do that, then you haven't mastered it. You might have gotten good at it, You might have had a few times where you've won something or earned something or whatever, been successful with it once or twice. That doesn't mean you've mastered it. And so then when I think about ag education and ag teachers at some of those, as you said, like pivotal, time frames, first 5 years, 5 to 10 and beyond. And just because you've stayed in the industry for 20 whatever years, no offense, does not mean that you have mastered it or everything or something. You might have. There's some that have. There's some that have mastered some things for sure. I don't think everybody. And I feel like if there were a more organic embracing of like really becoming true high performers and focusing on self-mastery by way of classroom first and always, by way of being selective about the things that you add on to your plate so that you're always doing whatever you're doing to the best of your ability with excellence in mind. And you can't do that when you're spread too thin. You can't do that when you aren't aligned with the vision with your department. You can't do that when you're constantly being undermined or sabotaged or cut short, unfortunately, by some of the other people that you work with. You're being set up for failure.
Well, you hear everybody though talk about, excuse me, hear everybody talk about how, well, ag teachers are jack of all trades, master of none. Well, how the fuck are you supposed to be a master of anything if you aren't able to focus on it, right? We're
Right.
totally piggybacking off last week's
Yes.
conversation, right? But it's even like, and again, I'm relating this and showing, trying to explain to people that it's not so different than what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Like my job is constant, just phone calls and helping people put out fires, whether it's customers or the technicians or the parts people or whatever. And I had this conversation with somebody the other day, and I'm like, I just feel like I'm fucking busy all the time, like busy trying to just do all of these things. And there's satisfaction in knowing that you've accomplished some things, but those are small fires in the grand scheme of
Yeah.
this life, right? And so what I'm sacrificing, and this is a true sacrifice, what I'm sacrificing being busy all the time and being spread so thin and having to put out so many fires is my ability to focus on any type of growth,
Mm-hmm.
period, or mastery of
Oh,
something. You
yeah.
can't actually get deep into something because there's going to be a phone call or a conversation or a need from somebody else that's going to disrupt that focus.
Yep.
Like, as long as I'm in my office, I'm available. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe that's the problem for,
Sure.
there's a lot of teachers they're just cool teachers that have kids come in all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they like that just having people around or conversation, or they're just way more extroverted. But like sometimes I just need a minute. Like
Yep.
I need to be able to shut off to the world, eat my lunch, or just like focus into something else because I am so used to just these quick focused intervals, and it doesn't allow me to achieve anything to a level of mastery, which is why every morning, most mornings now, I've changed my program, but that lift or that run that I'm doing in the morning when it's dark is my time to work on me. That's
Yep.
a step in towards self-mastery, whether it's mastering a lift or hitting a personal record of how much weight I'm going for, whatever that looks like. That's where I'm gaining mastery. And that's at this point kind of the only place I can gain any type of mastery, because that's the only place I'm not fucking distracted by the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's us calling to the mat the same things we were guilty of. We were guilty of poor routines, poor norms, like allowing the standard that was set to be too low, which is like case in point why we're redefining it,
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
it's about elevating and making things better. But you can't, and I guess this is a point that keeps getting lost on not everybody, a select few, but some people still don't understand that growth doesn't come unless there's change. And you can't change what you do not acknowledge. It's like, okay, you've got a baby. I've got kids that at one time were babies. They had to learn how to crawl and walk and do all the things. Like when a kid's figuring that out and they're pulling themselves up to stand on a couch or a table or whatever it is, and they're not quite ready and their legs are wobbly and then boop, they fall back down on their diaper butt. Like, oh, okay, that didn't work. All right, so now I'm gonna, right? And they keep trying. They keep trying until they figure out the way and the balance and all the things that they need in order to do the big kid stuff of walking around. But they had to get it wrong first, but they had to acknowledge this is not working. This new way that I'm going to try it is going to wind up being the way that works. Like, I think maybe we get used to also collectively as a profession when we have conversations in sectional meetings, regional meetings, even at our summer conference at times. When there's a collective conversation, we can talk about the room for growth without it being shameful, without it being, let's drag somebody or some group of educators' noses through it. It really doesn't have to be like that. But again, if we tire ourselves of having the same conversations over and over, having the same data looking at us in the face, and yet we choose to do nothing differently, you can't be anything but exasperated by coming back to the same situation a year later and you're still asking the same questions, boo. So it's like, can we acknowledge there's probably a better way? And then if we've got some friends that are now on the outside, right? Like, I don't know, let's have the conversation. Let's talk about the better way. Let's try. Let's actually try.
Well, the people that take offense to that though don't have any humility yet. Or they fucking hate themselves so much that they project that out to everybody else. But the people that don't want to hear this message or are not in a growth type mindset are the people that are, I mean, it's pretty simple equation. They're never going to grow, right? And not that we have all the answers. Like you and I don't have all the answers, obviously, but we have a different perspective.
Yeah.
For those of you who think that we're know-it-alls, right? The point that we're trying to get across here is without a growth mindset, without being open-minded and trying to come up with a solution for what could not only keep people in the profession, but keep people in the profession much longer than the numbers say, and actually get them to buy in and have a prosperous career within ag education, you're going to have to make some adjustments. You're going to have to find what works, and what works for most people it still isn't going to work for everybody, and that's okay. That's every profession across the board. But some of y'all are so locked into this mindset of, well, this is the only way that we can do it. That's not going to work. Shut the fuck up. Seriously. You are so caught up in your own head. You are so caught up in your own little world, and you think that your world is the only world that anybody lives in. That's bullshit. Most people aren't even going to respect you for that matter, because they know that you don't have any humility. They know that your ego overtakes and has everything to do with every decision that you make.
Do you think too, and I was just wondering this as you were talking, do you think part of this part of the challenge, we'll just call it, because it's not a problem, this part of the challenge is that for so long, even when I think back to being a student, right? A student in ag ed, and I went to a few different high schools. So I'm not just coming from like a one perspective point of view. But the story has always been, we're ag education. We are different, and let's just say better than, because we have the 3-ring model. Like that was the cherry on top. This is what makes us amazing. Nobody else does what we do or how we do it. So we're different and we're better. And I think pushing that part of the narrative for so long, and I don't disagree. Like, I don't disagree with the model whatsoever. It is phenomenal. It does good things for kids. But I think pretending that that's the only metric at play here and then ignoring the rest of the big picture creates a false narrative. And then the more that we are just cycling through that over and over and over and over, it's like you create your own echo chamber. And then all of a sudden, as soon as people start saying, hey, like, we've got some people that aren't hanging around for an entire career. Hey, we shifted from male dominated profession to female dominated, but hey, we also expect women to like get married and pop out babies and, you know, do the thing, but then hey, we also want them to be at every single freaking activity and to not, you know, get tired or burnt out or feel guilty or anything. Like, I just I'm trying to figure out how to word this, but I think we've done ourselves a disservice focusing on the one thing we do well and being unwilling to acknowledge there are other things we could be doing better. I guess that is my point.
I think most people are just looking to have their ideas validated
Yeah.
in terms of that, right? They're just looking for other people to join in because it's a mob mentality. Apparently that's just how we're fucking wired as people, right? And it's funny because you can see, like, even on here, right? I can see it with you, and I can even tell with myself going back and reviewing some of these videos when you're passionate about something, like just how your face locks in and you don't give a shit what anybody thinks, what anybody says.
Uh-huh.
That's so important because at that point you're not looking for validation. Like,
Mhm.
some people are going to agree with you and some people are like, that guy's a dick. Well, maybe I am. But I'm speaking strongly about it because it's something I feel strongly about,
Yeah.
where I think most people are just looking to join the mob, right? And everybody's doing this or everybody's thinking this, so this is how I should think, right? Quit
Mhm.
being a fucking sheep
Mhm.
and be like your own person
Yeah.
is
We're social beings, you know, and we're hardwired to, I think, like crave belonging, you know, like you want to belong to a tribe. You want the protection, the security, the socializing, you know, that connectedness. Um, yeah, we're wired to want that. And then you have a positive experience, for many people have a positive experience in ag education as a student. You're like, whoa, that was really amazing. That person mentored me, believed in me when I had no belief in myself, created an environment where I could be successful. And maybe I'd never been successful at anything before. I want to do that. I want to duplicate that. How amazing. I can get paid to do that. That could be my job, is to do that and get to go to the same favorite FFA contest that I loved in high school. I can do that like every weekend. But then we get here and it's like, when you see the strings at the puppet show and you get to look behind the scenes sometimes, there's so much more. There has to be so much more, right? And I think, I know that there are so many really, really good people in ag education. Um, Even some that I disagree very strongly with some of their mindsets and their beliefs, but there's really good people in ag education. And I think it's safe to say we both still believe so strongly in ag education. And it's like, if we could just if we could just shift the perspective like 1 degree in a slightly different direction, um, it could forever change the trajectory of many people's careers, change the trajectory of the profession as a whole. And it's not big stuff. Like, I'm thinking about things, and this goes back to, I was listening to like a personal growth like podcast earlier this week, and I think the topic was basically on identity versus discipline. And it was Brendan Burchard, and he was saying that so often people come to him and say, hey, Brendan, can you riff on discipline? Or can you do a teaching on discipline? What do I need to do to be more disciplined? Like, I keep quitting stuff, or I'm not good at this, and right? And in the session, Brendan starts talking and, discussing what a lot of people kind of associate discipline as being. And he's like, here's the thing. Discipline isn't really your problem. If you have a lack of discipline, then it is the symptom of or the indication that something's misaligned with your identity. That because you have stopped being disciplined in a certain area, maybe you're not doing your workout, maybe you're eating like shit, maybe you're saying yes to everything when deep down you meant to say no, and now you've created a situation for yourself that you can't get out of, and you're juggling all the balls like you and I have talked about in prior episodes on this channel. But you do that, and then all of a sudden you're now training your brain to think, I'm always so busy, or I never blank, I can't blank. That's an identity that you're taking on for yourself. And the more that you take on those identities, the more your brain believes it. And what your brain believes, your body is going to do, and how you're going to navigate through your life. And then you're going to continue making those same types of decisions. You're going to continue not getting up early, not doing the routine that a few weeks ago was working for you. Case in point, I have a client that messaged me this week who was so freaking frustrated. And she's like, Colleen, I need us to get on a Zoom. I need to meet with you. I need to see you. I'm not doing any of the shit. I'm not doing any of the stuff you told me to. I'm not doing any of the stuff that when I was doing it a few weeks ago had me feeling the best I felt in my life in years, but I'm not doing it anymore. Because, like we've also talked about before, she missed a couple of days. Life happened, work got crazy freaking stressful, and she let go of a couple of those things a couple of times. All of a sudden, she went from being the person who did those things for herself to I don't. I'm not prioritizing myself. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not setting myself up to be successful. And now I suck at everything. And because I suck at everything, I'm going to keep not doing those things so that I can continue to prove to my brain that my brain's right, that I suck at everything. And I think as a profession, if we took that step back and got back to the basics, like when you first start student teaching, one of the very first practices most mentors encourage their mentees to do is to keep a journal. And after each class you teach, at least this is what Matt Patton did with me. Shout out to the man, right? He's a cool dude.
Come on the show.
I know, taught me a lot of really good stuff, right? But one of the first things he told me to do is after every single class that I teach, even if it's just for 5 seconds while the kids are coming through the door, write down what worked, what didn't work, what you would do differently. And then at the end of the day, when you have a few more minutes, you can really kind of like review and reflect and capture some thoughts down. When I was doing that on a regular basis, oh my God, I could go class to class and be like, okay, this rocked, do that again. This didn't work. Let's try it this way this time. Whoa, now second period, we were rocking and rolling here. If I could just change this piece by fifth period, holy shit, I'm going to blow their fucking socks off, right? Little practice. When you do the little things, it makes a big difference. How many teachers do you think actually reflect on their practices every day? Probably less than 5%. Probably less than 5%. And Brendan this week in that same session I was listening to said that he has data proving that when people, and this is for him on his app, but when people are listening to that personal growth content while journaling, that their action taking, their behaviors, their proof of success increases by, it's like 70% or something insane. Just by that one little practice of like reflecting and writing down your thoughts, reconnecting to yourself and your experience. But we want to just show up every day and be like, oh, we've got this covered. I've been teaching this many years. I can show up and wing it now. Sure can. How's that serving you? Just showing up and winging it. Just showing up to the field days and having the same conversations, going to the same breakfast, making the same poor bad decisions for your health and mindset. How's that working out? We're burning out a profession.
There's so many talking points there, but the first one I want to go back to, no, you're good. It's all ideas, right? The first one I want to go back to is the identity piece, right? I remember when I was at high school and even teaching at the college, it's like when you meet somebody new who's not maybe in the profession even, they're like, oh, what do you do? Or, and it's like, oh, I'm a high school ag mechanics teacher. Oh shit, that's cool. You know what I mean? It's not like, I'm a high school math teacher. Like, oh, what do you teach? Nobody gives a fuck what you teach if you're a math teacher. But if you're a high school ag mechanics teacher and a high school ag teacher, people
Mhm.
want to know more, right?
Yeah.
And so that interesting bit about you being an ag teacher to a stranger is a little bit of, I don't know, in my eyes, it's a little bit of like a, yeah, look at me, I'm kind of cool, right? And I felt that way. But then it became my identity. Then it became, well, what are you, Corey? Well, I'm an ag teacher. I wasn't married yet. I didn't have a daughter yet. I wasn't, you know, necessarily on my personal development mission quite yet. I was just, I'm a high school ag teacher. Well, yeah, but what really are you? Because if that's the identity that you want to take on when I'm 75, 80 years old, if I get to that point and, or lying on my deathbed at some point, I don't want to be remembered as a fucking ag teacher. Like, that doesn't matter anymore. I don't care that I was a service manager. Like, oh, cool. Like, who gives a shit? At that point in time, none of that stuff matters, right? It just matters now because of this instant gratification mindset that we have. So taking on that identity, though cool and interesting,
Mhm.
is also a little bit dangerous too, because you could you could spend the rest of your life just being that and nothing else.
Mhm.
And that's a that's a scary thought to have, especially for some of the young people. And again, this is about encouraging people to be ag teachers, but you
Yes.
need to be something else too. One of the best pieces of advice I got as a beginning ag teacher, and I probably have mentioned this in a previous episode, find a hobby. You have to have a hobby. Whether it's shooting, whether it's motorcycles, whether it's lifting weights, whatever that looks like for you. Obviously, I would push you towards the personal development side of things, right?
Yes.
But have a fucking hobby that can be more of an identity to you instead of your job. Because at the end of your life, your job is not going to matter. What does matter, and this is where it gets super, super big, and then I'm going to let you unload because I know I could see you building up. I had this conversation with a good friend of mine who's still in the profession the other day, is the influence and the impact that you're having on students' lives through FFA, mostly through your classes, through what CDE teams or SAE project, whatever that looks like. You are impacting lives. And the goal is, and this is more of an identity piece, is being able to influence a student's life to where they get better because they knew you, right? I'm not a teacher anymore. I'm helping people find the right steps to take in their life. I'm a resource for them. I'm an influence. Don't fuck up the way that I fucked up.
Yeah.
Don't, get in debt the way that I got in debt. But explain that to them. You have to have a why behind everything and being able to influence that. And there is no better, in my opinion, other than probably sports being probably a close second. There is no better way to influence and impact students' lives than through ag education. Because I've heard people say before, oh man, I wish I'd played sports in high school. I feel like I missed out on a lot of shit, right? I've never, ever, ever heard a student, former student, whatever, say, I wish I wasn't involved in agate or FFA. I wish I always hear the alternative. Man, I wish I knew about this sooner. I wish somebody had talked to me about this sooner. I wish I wasn't such a jackass when I was a freshman. Like you always hear that because they realize the importance of it. And it might not necessarily mean anything for them career wise. Like it's, oh, cool, you were an FFA. If you don't know what FFA is as an employer, who the fuck cares, right? It's not going to get you a job per
Mhm.
se, but just knowing the skills that you can develop through that, the people that you meet, and the influences that you can gather
Mhm.
or even provide for somebody is so powerful. And as ag educators, that goes to that leadership piece and being a mentor. That's more of an identity than just the title of ag educator or ag teacher.
Yes. Yeah. And that was the part that I started to like get antsy in my seat over. In the beginning, of your career in ag education, it's natural, like you said, to be, you're so excited, you're so on fire for it that it does. You really kind of identify yourself as, this is what I am. And I think what you're really doing is your brain is now putting you in that same circle of fire as the person who inspired you to want to get there in the first place, right? Like, I'm here now. This is who I am. This is what we do, right? We do the 3-ring model. We have an impact on other people. We make our communities better. Like, I have chills when I'm talking about it. But the identity piece, I think where most of us falter in that way is, as you said, when it becomes all of who you are is your job, because at the end of the day, this is a job. You are paid, right? You are paid as an agriculture educator / FFA advisor in the state of California. Okay. When you become your job and your identity is just that, in my opinion, you're starting to let go of the underlying fire, the passion, the purpose. So what we're saying is, love your job, love ag education, like, be all about it for whatever period of time that you're here. Great, that's amazing. In terms of the bigger picture and your life, which who knows however long any of us get to be here, right? And I always think about, if you put your life on a timeline, like, let's assume, okay, at 0, that's the day you're born, okay, and then maybe, I'm crossing my fingers, I think it would be amazing to live to be 100. I don't know, I just think that's kind of cool. Let's say I get 100 years, right? Okay, I'm turning 39 in September. Sometimes when I look at that timeline, it looks like I have hardly any time left, and I want to cram as much as I can into the last, it's not even 3/4 left. Okay. Like, we're a little bit past that point. I'm not good at math. I'm good enough to know that I'm past, right? I'm past that point. There's other times I look at it, when I really think about some of the stuff I've done in this first 38, some of the stuff I've been through, gone through, survived, transcended. Now the things that I'm building, because, like, I'm past the point of just getting through stuff. Now I'm building stuff. I'm creating things. I'm doing new stuff that I've never done before. Then I get excited. And when I look at whatever amount of time's left, now it feels longer, bigger, more possibility, more opportunity. But when you get lost in the identity, it's like you're just kind of in a hamster wheel. And there might be good days. There might be days where you're like, oh yeah, I could keep doing this. But then I think it creeps up so fast. And especially when you look at the attrition rate, the groups of teachers that we have, some of the different demographics, if all you're connected to is the job, and if your identity is just that one piece, you are missing out on so much. And if you want longevity in this profession, especially, you have to find ways to renew. You have to find ways to reconnect to yourself. And you have to find, I think, ways to re-engage with a deeper sense of purpose. It can't just be, I'm an ag teacher. Why? What does that mean? What does that really mean to you? What is that really about? If you can dig deep down into the heart of your why and your purpose, that's different. That's an identity that you can, like, really sink your teeth into. Ag education, that's not an identity. It's a profession. It's a job. Your purpose, your why, has to be deeper than that job. Otherwise, it'll swallow you up.
Well, going back to that purpose piece, that's a great example, because I think we're all guilty of this, myself included, and this is actually something I'm working on currently. But we are guilty of being consumed is not the right word, but we're a product of our environment, basically. Like, you let your job or your career mold you into that system.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we not necessarily molding the system to fit our needs, right? And this could be totally taken out of context here, but, like, not one person is going to be like, well, I'm going to be the one who's going to change this whole motherfucker to be my way, right? However, again, as we've talked about many times, you are the leader and captain of the ship of your classroom.
Yes.
And so many people behind me, like my company's name, Legacy Training, want to build this legacy or create a legacy for themselves to leave behind for everybody to remember, right? That guy was great. Like Jim Bomb Prezi. I took over at Madeira for John, and John had taken over for Jim. Jim was there for 33 years, 34 years, and won like 10 small engines state championships. Like the guy's fucking legend. Like sent so many kids off to work as technicians in the industry, like a really, really successful dude.
Mhm.
And he built this legacy through commitment to this excellence, right? Like he was all in on this whole situation. But when you talk to Jim, his identity wasn't necessarily as an ag teacher. It was more to help these people. You know, he didn't let that profession mold him. And that's one of the things I really respected about him as a person, is he was who he was.
Yeah.
And that profession, that classroom was going to have to adapt to Jim. And
Mhm.
I know that because I actually got to teach side by side with him at one point, which was really cool. Um, the point I'm making here is if you want to leave that legacy, then it starts in your classroom. And that classroom, you have to be passionate about what you're doing and commit to those students that are right in front of you and give them everything you have. Because nobody remembers an ag teacher, well, that guy was really good at this and this and this. Or it's like, that motherfucker was great at coaching teams, or that motherfucker was a great teacher, like sent, you know, the X amount of kids to the college level for Diesel's program type thing, like, or into the industry, that type of situation. Like if that's truly what you're passionate about, and you really should do what you're passionate about, and sometimes I'm wondering if I'm following my own example in certain things in life, but finding that passion, finding what drives you, and then using that as that force that pushes you forward. Because again, this, I mean, you, when you look at your life on a tape measure from 0 to whatever your age is, and then you look at to where you possibly could get, you're like, oh, I got this much time left. Or, oh shit, I only got this much time left. None of us know. And so it's doing a disservice to everybody around you, your family, yourself, the people that you're working with, if you're not fully bought into it, and being you in the process and not molding yourself to what that profession needs you to be. Because at that point, now you're fraud.
Yeah. Ugh, so good. I as you were talking about that last part, um, it's been kind of like I've had a lot of full circle moments in the last several weeks. There are so many. It's funny because in my like friend circle and like family friend circle, there's a lot of educators. Most of them have always taught in the primary grades. But I was at my mom's house for bunco last night. I was a sub. Super exciting. It was me and a whole bunch of like 60-plus-year-old women. Oh my God. Hilarious. They're talking about how oh yeah, I bumped into so and so, like they were my student however many years ago, and now they're married and their kid is in X grade, and just joking about the math and how long they've been teaching. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, I taught high schoolers, so now they're it's even different. I'll be in the grocery store and I'll see a prior student, and they're walking up to me and they've got a 12 pack in each hand, and then their face goes red. And I'm like, hey, dude, it's all cool. Like, I know you're 21, right? We're in a grocery store. It's like, we're fine. I'm also not an ag teacher anymore, so it's even more fine. But in the last several weeks, many of my prior students are now graduated college. Some of them are married and having kids. Some are like newly engaged, but a lot of them are just at the point where they're at the beginning of whatever their careers are going to be. Um, Several in real estate, which is interesting. And so I always love when they post like different listings and when they close, and I'm always like whooping them up. But what I've noticed too is a lot of them are also sharing about or including on their social media whatever it is that they're doing for personal development and health and fitness. And it's not because I'm doing it at all. But we have some messages going back and forth, and it's like, hey, I saw you just do that. That was fucking badass. Like, way to go. That was super heavy. Good for you. Um, and as I'm like thinking about these specific students while you're talking, I realize that in especially the last 2 years leading up to when I stepped away from the classroom, the number of times that my students would ask me, hey, Lawson, how's your book coming? Because I was very open. I was very open about some of my long-term goals, dreams, and aspirations, especially as for a long time, I was the ag leadership teacher. So we were constantly having those types of conversations, vision boarding, long-term planning, all those things. And time after time, the kids kept asking, how's this going for you? How much writing have you done this week, this month, this year? And I kept finding myself like, oh shit, I've trained them so good. I've trained them so good, but they're holding me accountable to the fact that I'm not living up to my potential. I'm not taking action on the things that I know I'm meant to be doing. They know, like I've been so open about it. They know that I need to be doing this stuff. And they started calling me out on it. And now being 3 years almost outside the classroom, I think a big difference is going back to where we started this conversation on, you can either get good at something or you can just focus on self-mastery. And I really think that when you focus on self-mastery from a personal development perspective, when you master yourself, you can learn anything else. You can develop discipline anywhere else. You can become good or even great at almost anything else because you've like mastered yourself first. I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm just kind of rambling, but it's been really interesting just seeing that juxtaposition of where I was when I was in the classroom and what the lack of self-mastery looked like, even though I was trying. Like I would get bits and pieces here or there, but I wasn't there yet. And I don't even think that I'm there now, but I'm aware that it exists and I'm always working towards it. So then when you're in that cycle of self-mastery and trying to expand and grow, every time you get to that next level, you realize how many more there are yet to hit. Whereas when I was still in the classroom with the lack of tools that I've developed now, it was more fixed. This contest, this state championship.
Well, no, where you were talking about like you're not sure if the students that you see doing personal development things, if that had anything to do with you. I would say that a lot of it does, and there's a part of that feels good because the students that I still have a lot of students that I follow or follow me on social media, and every time I see them like getting fit or getting ripped, it just makes me so fucking proud because like they knew that I took on like that personal development piece at one point and kind of watched me transform just physically, maybe not mentally. Maybe I was a better teacher because of it. I think that I was, not that they would have noticed that per se,
Yeah.
but just knowing how much I cared and loved the fitness piece and seeing my body transform.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that for some of them, they took that to heart and they begin to implement that in their life. And I make it a point if I see it on there to recognize that and show them that I'm watching and I'm like, dude, I'm so fucking proud of you. Like, look at what you've done, dude. That's so cool, and I know it fires them up.
Yeah.
But in in all reality, we are that role model for our students.
Mm.
And if anybody's looking for a lesson to teach, if you want every single set of eyes on you and not on cell phones, the best thing you can go over is finances. I spent and I would just like out of the blue, like fuck it, I'm not going over carburetors today. We're going to talk about finances. I'm not a numbers guy, and my financial situation is not what you would call great. It's better than it was at one point, but it's not great, right? Writing a number on the board, the total debt that I had accrued through college, through a truck payment, through just being a jackass with money,
Yeah.
and then listing all the other payments that I was having per month, and then just writing a dollar figure up there, like not what I was making, but just this is hypothetically what I'm making, but this is my legitimate debt.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the month, how much money do I have left over? How did I get here? How did I get into so much debt? How did I get so fucked up and so behind? How did I allow that to happen? How can you not allow yourself to get to my situation? Now we got a talking point. You will get questions that you probably won't be ready or prepared to answer, but if you ever want to find yourself in front of a classroom and like know that you're making an impact on students' life, show them your debt. Show them the struggles. They want to know that you're a real person. And once they know you're a real person, then they can have you as a person to emulate.
Yeah.
If they think that you're just one of those teachers that just sleeps there and doesn't go home, doesn't have a family, like doesn't share any personal information with them, then you're just a talking head at the front of the classroom that
Mhm.
teaches something that most of them aren't interested in learning anyways.
Yeah.
But what makes you an effective role model, leader, teacher will help you leave that legacy we talked about and give you a sense of purpose. If your purpose is helping people, will be being that personable with your students and being open and being and allowing them to hold you accountable just as you hold them accountable for things. You'll see so many things change in not just your classroom, but your entire life.
Yeah. Yeah. Two things, and then we can wrap this one up with a bow. But I love what you said there about if you want your students to pay more attention to you than their phones, like put a number on the board. It just made me think, if you want them to pay more attention to you than whatever is happening on their phones, and let's be honest, social media, give them something so freaking amazing in your classroom. They can't do anything but be engaged. They can't do anything but want to be in that moment with you. And I'm not saying some people aren't, but like, we're so quick to complain on social media. If parents would discipline more at home, kids would be ready to learn at school, or, oh, take all these cell phones. I'm sorry, but like, we're better than that. Captivate their freaking attention. Give them something. Give them something to be excited about. Otherwise, I'm sorry, what is going on their phone is probably way more exciting than what a lot of y'all are doing in your classroom. That's just the fact of the matter. If they were interested, they'd be paying attention. Give them something to be interested about. And I love what you said there, connecting it to financial literacy. Please, God. I mean, we don't even know how to fill out envelopes anymore. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. Second thing I wanted to say is this. You're talking about debt. I'm not talking about finances here. So we're going to divert for a second. Not talking financially. We have accrued such a debt in this profession. And what all of us know is that at some point in time, the debt collector comes and you've got to pay. And I think we are at this point in ag education where if we do not start to lean into the better ways of doing things, if we do not start to actually embrace a mentorship program that creates more leaders, if we do not start holding all of us accountable to a higher standard, the attrition rate, like the stuff that we see happening or not seeing in the classrooms, it's just going to be more. And the debt collector's coming. Like, are you ready? Are you ready for that? Or are you just going to keep accruing more debt? Are you going to keep accruing poor health, declining mindsets, more arguing and combative situations at regional meet? Like, it just, I don't know. I think we are accruing a debt that too few people realize exists, number one, and not enough are going to be ready to, when you're called to the mat, like, are you going to be ready to make a payment? I don't think so. So you better get ready. And if you are new here, welcome. This is Beyond Ag Ed, and what we do here is redefine the standards. So if you would like to participate in that endeavor, please like this video, subscribe to this channel so that you are notified about all future newly released episodes. And if you've got a friend or a foe they're a fan either way, be sure and share this episode with them. We would love for their eyes to take a look. Friends, that is it for this episode. I'm Coach Colleen. This is Coach Cory. We'll see you next time.